members of the North Kansas City, Missouri Police Department, and leadership from the city of North Kansas City. Before I begin, it is my obligation to state that the charge of an offense is not evidence of guilt, and that defendants are presumed innocent until found guilty in a court of law. On March 2nd, police were dispatched to North Kansas City High School on the report of shots being fired. The investigation revealed that two groups of young men left a basketball game being played at the school a little before 6 p.m. A witness heard a person from the second group to leave yelling at the first group to leave while keeping one hand concealed. At that point, an individual from the first group drew a firearm and began shooting. At that point, three individuals from the second group then drew firearms and also began shooting. Dozens of people who had no relationship to these groups of young men were in the area when the shooting occurred. During the exchange of gunfire, two people were wounded. One was a person under the age of 18 who was not associated with either group. The other injured person was part of the first group of young men seen leaving the basketball game. Surveillance shows him falling to the ground while being shot at by several young men. He is then seen raising a black handgun and firing one time. Footage shows a total of 5 individuals from the two groups shooting firearms. Over 50 shell casings were recovered. 9mm, 10mm, 40 caliber, and 45 caliber shell casings were collected at the scene. Footage also indicates that all the individuals who were seen discharging firearms outside were in possession of loaded firearms while inside the North Kansas City High School gymnasium. I want to stress that this remains an open investigation, an ongoing investigation, which means that additional charges may be filed. I encourage anyone with any information relevant to these crimes to contact the North Kansas City Police Department. I also want to commend the men and women of the North Kansas City Police Department, the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department, Liberty Police Department, the Riverside Police Department, and all the other law enforcement agencies that assisted in this investigation. Without their diligent work, we would not be here announcing charges today. I would also like to recognize all the first responders who were there that day that rushed to a situation that they did not have all the facts about in order to protect the citizens in our community. My prayers go out to the young man who was simply going to a basketball game when he was shot. I wish him a continued and complete recovery from his injuries. As a result of these events, my office charged 2 individuals with crimes today. The state charged Michael Smallwood with the following charges: the A felony of unlawful use of a weapon, in that, on or about March 2nd, 2024, in Clay County, the defendant acting alone or in concert with another knowingly discharged a firearm at another person or persons, and as a result of the above described conduct, a victim suffered injury. That is an A felony, with a range of punishment between 10 and 30 years incarceration or life imprisonment. In count 2, the defendant is charged with armed criminal action, which carries with it a range of punishment of between 3 and 15 years incarceration. In count 3, the defendant is charged with the Class E felony of unlawful use of a weapon, in that, on or about March 2nd, 2024, the defendant knowingly carried a loaded firearm, a weapon readily capable of lethal use, into a school. That is an E felony with a range of punishment of up to 4 years incarceration. After the state filed charges, the court set the bond on that defendant at $75,000. The second defendant is Lavondre Smallwood. He is charged in count 1 with A felony of assault in the first degree, which also has a range of punishment between 10 and 30 years incarceration or life imprisonment. In count 2, he's charged with the felony of armed criminal action, which carries with it a range of punishment between 3 and 15 years incarceration. In count 3, he's charged charged with a felony of unlawful use of a weapon. In that, on or about March 2nd, 2024, acting alone, purposefully in concert with another, knowingly discharge a firearm at another person, and as a result, the described conduct, a victim suffered injury. Like I said, that is a felony with a range of punishment between 10 and 30 years incarceration or life imprisonment. In count 4, defendant is charged with armed criminal action, which also carries a range of punishment between 3 and 15 years incarceration. And finally, in count 5, the defendant was charged with the felony of unlawful use of a weapon in that he knowingly carried a loaded firearm, a weapon readily capable of lethal use, into a school. No one should have to fear being shot when they go to a high school basketball game in Clay County. These events are meant to bring our community together. So my message to those who would come to our community, would victimize our citizens, endanger our citizens' lives, is that you will be held to account and justice will find you inside a Clay County courtroom. With that being said, and understanding this remains an open investigation, an ongoing investigation, and there are open cases, I'm happy to answer a few questions.
Are these gentlemen named Smallwood, sir, are they related?
They are brothers.
Okay. Which one is older? Do we have ages?
They're both adults, charged as adults. Levondre Smallwood has a date of birth of February 16th, 2006. Michael Smallwood has a date of birth of March 14th, 2005.
Thank you.
So you said 5 people drew guns. How many people were there between the two groups?
There were 5 people seen on surveillance discharging the firearms. Is that your question?
Were there people in the groups that didn't pull guns as well?
There were people in the groups that were unarmed, or at least did not. There's no evidence they were armed at this point. And there were also, dozens of innocent bystanders surrounding the area.
Zach, do you know, was there a beef here, and what was this dispute about?
It's still unclear exactly what the nature of the dispute was about. That being said, the probable cause statement indicates that there were words exchanged between the two groups before the gunfire began.
You know, the bullet that either was fired was one of the ones that hit the bystander?
I'm sorry?
Do you know if the bullet that either was fired was one of the bullets that hit the bystander?
So the investigation's ongoing. I know there's evidence at the lab being processed, so it's still a very preliminary investigation.
Do you know if anyone involved was a student at the school?
There is no indication that any of the parties that discharged firearms were students at the school or associated with the school, right?
Were they associated with the school with the teams they were playing?
There's no evidence of that.
So they were just applicants?
That's the understanding is they were inside the North Kansas City Gymnasium watching a basketball game, and then sometime around 6 o'clock, they came outside. And that's when words were exchanged and the gunfire erupted.
Do we know who these other people were? You're still trying to identify them?
So, like I said, this is an ongoing investigation. My goal in this process is not only to protect the integrity of the investigation, but the integrity of these ongoing criminal cases. So, I don't think it would be prudent at this point to disclose that kind of information.
So you mentioned the two groups that were leaving. One of them had their name concealed during your argument. Can you clarify again? Was the first fire, was the person with their name concealed?
So there were 2 groups of young men. The first group is an individual with the first group was the one to shoot first, right? And then the person I described who yelled something at that first group with their hand concealed was in the second group.
Do you know if it's usually common practice during games at the school to have some kind of a security screening?
So I'm unfamiliar with the security practices at North Kansas High School. That'd be a question better directed for North Kansas.
As a prosecutor, cases like this take priority. Your hopes of incoming and your hopes of getting convictions.
So my goal in this case is the same as my goal in any case we prosecute in Clay County, and that's to find justice inside the court.
How helpful were all of the witnesses that were inside the gym outside?
So, it's a complicated case. There were a lot of witnesses. I think the investigation was definitely assisted by the statements made by the witnesses at the scene. If there are no more questions, I thank you for your time.
Are photographs available to this